الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم على خير خلق الله أجمعين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم اغفر لنا ولوالدينا ولشيخنا ومشايخه وللحاضرين وللمسلمين أجمعين. أما بعد، قال الشيخ العلامة الحافظ عبد الغني المقدسي رحمه الله تعالى في كتابه عمدة الأحكام كتاب الصيام عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال: قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم: لا تقدموا رمضان بصوم يوم ولا يومين إلا رجلا كان يصوم صوما إلا رجلا
عندك بالفتح؟
نعم. إلا رجلا كان يصوم صوما فليصمه. عن عبد الله بن عمر رضي الله عنهما قال: سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول: إذا رأيتموه فصوموا وإذا رأيتموه فأفطروا فإن غم عليكم فاقدروا له.
نعم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن استنى بسنته واهتدى بهديه إلى يوم الدين. قال الإمام عبد الغني بن قدامة رحمه الله تعالى المقدسي قال: كتاب الصيام في عمدة الأحكام، يقول كتاب الصيام. كتاب he said the book of fasting. Fasting in the linguistic meaning is to hold of anything. That is in Arabic, siyam. Siyam means hold of anything. As they say, خيل صيام وخيل غير صائمة. Horses which are fasting and horses which are not fasting. And fasting in regard to the horses here means holding of producing the sound. So meaning that they are not used in buttons, and others producing sounds as they are used in the button. وفي سورة مريم, as in Surah Maryam, Allah Ta'ala said about Maryam alayhi salam when she was pregnant by the word of Allah, and she escaped from her people to a place which is an abandoned place, and then out of sudden appeared a person, a man who she did not recognize, and she said, أعوذ بالله منك, or she said, إني نذرت للرحمن الصوم. I vote for Ar-Rahman fasting. Here fasting means not to speak. Not fasting of holding of food and drink, but fasting means hold of speech. I promised Allah I will not speak to anybody. لن أكلم اليوم إنسيا. I will not speak to any mankind. So that is the meaning linguistically. But in the Sharia, fasting means to hold of eating, drinking, or all other nullifiers of fasting, such as eating, drinking, or an alternative like having that which suffices the body from food and drink through vein, like glucose or whatever. And also the other nullifiers, which are such as the sexual intercourse or ejaculating deliberately, not as in dream, not a wet dream, but if someone enjoyed his wife or by any means he encouraged ejaculating then of himself, then his fasting is nullified. Whether he done the full process of sexual intercourse, or just touched or played or thought, whatever. He ejaculated deliberately with the desire of sex. Then that nullifies. Or he had his private part inserted in the woman's private part, even without ejaculating, just inserting and bringing out, even not all of his private part, but at least the head, where the circumcision. If this happened, then he has nullified his fasting. The consequences are different. If he inserted his private part, the way we mentioned, in his wife's private part, then his fasting of that day is nullified. He has to hold of eating and drinking the rest of the day. He has to make up that day. He has to repent to Allah the Almighty from doing this crime. Crime because it is breaking the law of fasting. Not crime as enjoying his wife. Enjoying the wife is a reward, not a crime, but in the permitted time. And also what he needs to do is to do the major recompense, which is fasting, or first of all, freeing a slave. If can't, then fasting 2 months in a row. If can't, then feeding 60 days, 60 poor people, feeding 60 poor people, Muslim, of course, Muslim poor people. The holding of these nullifiers of fasting must be from the true dawn, which is called the second dawn, because we have two types of dawn. First dawn, which is called false dawn, and that is when the white light comes vertical from the heavens to the earth, like a line breaking the heavens like that, from up to down. That is called false dawn. One does not need to hold of eating and drinking or enjoying his wife at that time. But the second, there is no much time between them both. The second is horizontal white light that come in the horizon from one end to one end of the earth. That is the true Fajr, true dawn, or the second dawn. When that appears, one needs to hold of eating and drinking and sexual intercourse until the sun sets, not until the darkness, not until the night get dark, لا, but it is until the sun disappears. If the sun disappeared, then that is the time when the person who's fasting needs to break his fast. And this must be done as a worship to Allah, not as a habit. Not as a habit. And that's why it requires an intention of worship. And the intention needs a continuity from beginning to the end of the day, as we are going to inshallah see. Fasting is one of the main worships that Allah made obligatory upon all of His creation, upon all of his slaves amongst mankind and jinn, from the first to the last. As Allah Ta'ala said in ayah 183 of Surah Al-Baqarah, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. O you who believe, it is made obligatory upon you to fast as it was made obligatory upon those before you to fast, so that you may be pious. You may be pious means you will be pious if you do so and or with the intention of worshipping Allah. So it is obligatory upon all nations, as we mentioned. But in Islam, in this ayah, Allah did not mention what month, what time, how many days, how fasting is for this ummah. And definitely the fasting was different from nation to nation in terms of what to fast of, how long, in which month, how many days. These all we don't know about in regard to the previous nations, but some athar and some opinions amongst the scholars say that all of it, the obligatory fast was in Ramadan for all nations. Allahu A'lam. But this nation of Islam is made to be in Ramadan. When it was in the second year of Hijrah, when the Prophet ﷺ came from Mecca to Medina migrating, and the first year he arrived, he found the people in Medina fasting on the day of Ashura, the 10th of Muharram. The 10th of Muharram. So he asked them, what is this day you are fasting? Why? The Yahud, the Jews, said that it is a day in which Allah has protected and survived Musa and the children of Israel who were with him from Pharaoh, and made Pharaoh to drown in the sea. So Musa fasted it as a way of thankfulness to Allah the Almighty. And we, meaning them, the Yahud, are fasting it for this reason. The Prophet ﷺ said to them, well, we, and in other narration, I have more right than you with my brother Musa alayhi salam. So we, the Muslims, because the Yahud are not Muslims. Not Muslims by meaning a kind of identity. La. Muslim by the faith. Because Muslim by faith, all prophets are Muslims and they call to Islam. People today, when Muslim is mentioned, they only that comes to their mind is a kind of nationality, like Asian or African or like that. But it means the faith. So Allah Ta'ala in the first year, now when the Prophet ﷺ found this, and this ayah came without mentioning the time in which Muslims should fast, the Prophet ﷺ commanded the Sahaba, and it was in the daytime of Ashura. He called Bilal to go and call people, whoever became fasting today, let him to continue fasting. Whoever had taken anything, let him to hold until the sunset. This was the obligatory fasting for this ummah for one day only. For one day only, ever. since Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was sent as the mandatory fasting. In the following year, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informed Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that the fasting which is obligatory is to be during the month of Ramadan. Why? Allah ta'ala gave the clarification. It is because the Quran was descended in it. Yani Allah in the first ayah said, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. Or you who believe, decreed upon you is fasting as it was decreed upon those before you that you may become righteous. And then Allah mentioned when. He said, أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودًا, just to make us feel or know that it's not that hard. Do not think that it is hard. It's only a few days. Fasting for a limited number of days. So whoever among you is ill, until now, the time frame or the timing of fasting isn't mentioned. Isn't mentioned. Only days. Could be in any month. Now, then Allah, after this ayah, mentioned when He wants us to fast. Is it open any time in the year, or it is determined to a specific time in the year? Allah Ta'ala in ayah 185 said, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان فمن شهد منكم الشهر فليصمه. The month of Ramadan is that in which was revealed the Quran, a guidance for the people and clear proofs of guidance and criterion. So whoever cites the crescent of the month of Ramadan, the newborn moon, here cites does not necessarily mean that he or every individual cites it. But if it is cited by any Muslim, and it is declared that tomorrow is Ramadan, then you all have to fast. Then you all have to fast. If a Muslim cited it and saw it, but no one else seen it, then it is obligatory upon him to be fasting the following day, not upon the rest. If the moon is sighted on the 29th of Sha'ban, so the following day for him is first of Ramadan. For the rest, who did not witness it, or it is not declared that tomorrow Ramadan, then for them it is 30th of Sha'ban. As we are going, inshallah, later to mention. But Allah said, whoever cites the crescent of the month, let him fast it. Let him fast it. And then the exemption came, as we are going to see sometime later, inshallah. So, and then Imam Ibn Qudama brought this hadith, the first hadith in this chapter. Hadith of Abu Hurayra radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, do not precede Ramadan by fasting a day or two, except a man who has a regular habit fasting, or regular habit of fasting, then let him to fast. Meaning, one who his habit through the year is to fast optional fasting such as Mondays and Thursdays. Or maybe he is someone who has a habit of fasting the way of fasting of Prophet Dawood alayhi salam. Fasting a day, breaking the following. Fasting a day, breaking the following, like that. Or he's someone who has a habit of fasting 3 days in a month, And until that time came, he did not finish his 3 days. And he wants to do them. Then he can do them. Because those 3 days could either be as known al-ayyamul bid, the white days, in which the moon is full, that is the midst of the lunar months, because in the midst of solar months, moon is not full. Because for the different, not necessarily constantly. Maybe sometimes they adhere, but very rare that they adhere one another. That it begins together, ends together. So you find the full moon in the midst of solar months. But anyway, the worships are related to lunar system, not solar system. As Allah Ta'ala said, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ. They ask you about the new crescents or the newborn moons. The one who has a habit to fast, let him to fast. One who doesn't have a habit, what does that mean? Someone who's fasting the month of Ramadan from beginning should not continue to the end, right to the end. Why? Because of this hadith. He said, let him not to fast. He said, do not precede Ramadan by fasting a day or two. Whether by initiating the fasting there, and starting there, or continuing but not as a habit of fasting through the year. Some ulama say, even if he has started before, these days, before the midst of Sha'ban, let him continue. Let him continue. That means one who wants to start fasting, then not to do, and more likely not to fast, not to precede Ramadan by a day or two, except if it is irregular fasting, meaning through the year. Now, and the saying here, لا تقدموا, the ulama differed. Is it for prohibition or dislikeness? The most likely that it is for prohibition. From where we get that? From the coming Ahadeeth, like the hadith of Aisha, when she mentioned that he never complete a month in fasting but Ramadan. And he used to fast Sha'ban except for some days. Now.
أحسن الله إليكم. قال رحمه الله تعالى عن أنس بن مالك رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم تسحروا فإن في السحور بركة.
نعم. لا إذا رأيتموه ما قلنا هذا. نعم حديث عبد الله بن عمر.
أقرأ. أحسن الله عليكم. عن عبد الله بن عمر رضي الله عنهما قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول إذا رأيتموه فصوموا وإذا رأيتموه فأفطروا فإن غم عليكم فاقدروا له.
نعم. Here in this hadith, second hadith of the chapter, Abdullah ibn Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu anhuma says that he heard the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, if you see it, then fast. See it. What is it? It is a pronoun referring back to the moon. It is like that someone asked him, when do we start fasting? Is it related to the moon? Then he said, if you see it, meaning the moon. The moon, the newborn moon of the month. طيب, here the Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا رَأَيْتُمُوهُ فَصُومُوا وَإِذَا رَأَيْتُمُوهُ فَأَفْطِرُوا. If you see it, then start fasting. And if you see it, then أفطروا. Here does أفطروا mean by Maghrib? لا. Here it means by the end of Ramadan. And this is a command that forbids fasting. Like the previous one, إِذَا رَأَيْتُمُوهُ فَصُومُوا, is a command that forbids not to be fasting. So in the morning of Ramadan, first day of Ramadan, it is forbidden to be not fasting. And in the first morning following Ramadan, it is forbidden to be fasting because it's the day of Eid. That's why he ﷺ said, إِذَا رَأَيْتُمُوهُ, meaning by the sunset of the last day of Sha'ban. Last day means either 29th or 30th. Not necessarily to be 30th. Could be seen on the 29th. When people go out for sighting the moon, 29th, and if they can't, then 30th. طيب, if they can't see it on 29th, why do they need to sight it on the 30th? Because it is a command from the Prophet ﷺ. And because there might be mistakes happened in the previous months. So we need to know. Let's say that previous months, maybe 2 or 3 months, moon sighting was mistaken. So it's accumulating. We couldn't see it, especially in those countries where clouds are most of the year blocking the vision. So what should they do? They should sight the moon on the 29th of Sha'ban by the sunset, and on the 29th of Ramadan. 29th of Ramadan. As it happened in 1 year in my life, or 2 years, 2 times in my life, and in the past many times, that the crescent of Shawwal, of the Eid, was seen by the sunset of 28th. And that's why sighting the moon of Shawwal is not on the 29th, but on the 28th. Why? Because you might sight the moon as mistake accumulated in the previous months, mistakes of sighting. So he ﷺ said, if you can't sight it because it's cloudy or dusty, a sandstorm that prevent vision, sighting, then you can. What you have to do? Then you have to complete the month, whether the month of Sha'ban to 30 days or the month of Ramadan to 30 days, as we are going to see in other Ahadeeth. Sighting the moon. How can we sight it? First of all, can we calculate? No, we cannot use calendars for fasting or for any worship. Why? Because only moon has times to disappear and then appear as a newborn moon, very thin and for few minutes and then disappears. That does not happen with the sun. That happens only with the moon. That's why the more accurate in timing is the lunar year, not the solar year. Now, so how to sight it? Are we allowed? So we knew now calendar is not to be used. How to sight it? It must be sighting, whether by naked eyes, as the Sahaba used to do, or by using binoculars or telescopes. And that is also from sighting, which this hadith covers it. So if it is sighted by telescopes or binoculars, then it is sighting and it is permissible. It is permissible to go with it. نعم. نعم.
أحسن الله إليكم. قال رحمه الله عن أنس بن مالك رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم تسحروا فإن في السحور بركة.
Now, after he brought the hadith to show the obligation of fasting, then he brought the hadith to show the period of fasting, which is the month of Ramadan. Because he said, صوموا لرؤيتي وأفطروا لرؤيتي, meaning the moon of Ramadan. And the moon of Shawwal. Then after that, he brought the hadith to show us from what time we begin our fasting. He said in the hadith of Anas ibn Malik radiallahu ta'ala عنهم, تسحروا. تسحروا. This is a command, but is it for obligation or likeness? La, it is for likeness. Because if one does not take sahur, he only lost the reward and only lost the advantage of eating at that time. But if he does, he will get three things. The advantage of eating in the last portion of the night to get the strength the rest of the day. He will get the reward of obeying the Prophet ﷺ in doing that. And he will also adhere or meet the time in which the dua is accepted, as in the hadith of Allah's descendants to the first layer of heavens. So he said, تسحروا. تسحروا means eat something at the time called as-sahar. As-sahar. And it is the time pre to Salat al-Fajr by about reciting 40 ayat. By about reciting 40 ayat. Normal recitation. Not very slow, not very fast, but normal recitation. And it is approximately maybe 20 minutes or yani, less than 40 ayat, less than. But yani, the shorter in length of time between your sahur and salah, the better. Because it means that you are going to have energy for the whole day, and it means that you are adhering the best time for which, or in which seeking for forgiveness, supplicating will be accepted. And then he said, فَإِنَّ فِي السَّحُورِ بَرَكَةً. السَّحُور, السُّحُور. السَّحُور is the meal you eat in the time called as-sahar. Like al-futur wal-fatur. Al-tahur wal-tuhur. Al-wudu wal-wudu. So, فَإِنَّ فِي السَّحُورِ السَّ. We have as-sa and we have as-su. As-sa is the meal that you eat. As-sahur. The meal you eat in the time called as-sahar. Before Fajr. Barakah, blessing. Why barakah? Barakah for your body because you get the strength. Barakah and your reward because you adhere the sunnah. Barakah for your needs because if you ask whatever, Allah will give you. You know, whether forgiveness or whatever you want from Allah in this world or in the hereafter, Allah will give you. Now.
أحسن الله إليكم. قال رحمه الله عن أنس بن مالك رضي الله عنه عن زيد بن ثابت رضي الله عنهما قال تسحرنا مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثم قام إلى الصلاة. قال أنس قلت لزيد كم كان بين الأذان والسحور؟ قال قدر 50 آية.
Zayd, Anas ibn Malik here is reporting it from Zayd ibn Thabit. Zayd ibn Thabit is the companion of Rasulullah who the Prophet ﷺ praised as the best who knows the ruling of inheritance. Ruling of inheritance. Zayd ibn Thabit. He is the best who is having the knowledge of distributing the inheritance in Islam. Zayd ibn Thabit ibn al-Dhahhak al-Ansari al-Khazraji. So he said, we were with the Prophet ﷺ. Or he said, we had sahur with the Prophet ﷺ. This hadith is a little bit, it has some kind of, sometimes one finds it strange. Why? Because Anas is the servant of Rasulullah who used to stick to the Prophet ﷺ all the time, but he did not witness this. And he reported it from other Sahabi who was Zayd. Zayd was not somebody who was sticking always to the Prophet ﷺ. Yes, he used to attend his classes, but this time, Fajr, before Fajr, is not time for classes. It is time for night prayers and witr and sahur and dua and seeking for forgiveness. So this must be seen by Anas more than it by Zayd. But it seems that they were in a journey, or Anas was sleeping one day and he missed it because he was very young. He started serving Rasulullah when he was 10 years old. And he lasted for 10 years as a servant of Rasulullah until the Prophet ﷺ passed away. So maybe he was sleeping at that time, or some other reasons. He said, that we had the meal of sahur with the Prophet ﷺ. And right after the meal, he stood for the Fajr prayer. Stood to the Fajr prayer. Here, he stood to the Fajr prayer. Does that mean the Iqamah or the Adhan? The Adhan. The Adhan. Why? Because Anas asked Zayd. Anas said, I said to Zayd, how long was it between the Adhan and the Sahur? Meaning in that particular time you witnessed the Prophet ﷺ eating Sahur. He said, it is as long as you read 50 ayat. I earlier said 40, that 50 ayat. 50 ayat. This does not show a long time. Because in 20 minutes, you can finish one whole juz of the Quran with normal recitation. With normal recitation. So it means that it was maybe 10 minutes, maybe less a little bit, maybe more a little bit. No? So he said, this is the time between Adhan and Sahur. Between Sahur, he began with Adhan. He said, كم بين الأذان والسحور. Here, it looks like the Adhan first, then the Sahur. La. But he mentioned the Adhan as the main incident, the main thing to happen. Because the fasting is not related to the Sahur, but related to the Adhan, the beginning of the fast. So he mentioned the Adhan as the time eating is prohibited. Then he mentioned the Sahur which preceded it. Should be how long was it between your sahur and your adhan? But because people will stop eating, by the adhan, he mentioned the adhan, to elaborate and emphasize something very important that many people misunderstand because of other hadith. They think that as long as it is still adhan, you can eat and drink, which is totally wrong. And they say, the Prophet ﷺ said, if the adhan starts and the utensil is in the hand of one of you, then let him not to leave it until he finishes his need from it. And that does not include one who knows that it is about to adhan and then he starts eating by the adhan. That's totally wrong understanding. So it means when the adhan starts, one has to stop eating, drinking, sexual intercourse, whatever. نعم نعم لعلنا نقف هنا. والله تعالى أعلم وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه.
بارك الله فيكم. Inshallah ta'ala will continue بإذن الله ta'ala, and you'll be informed inshallah when the next sitting will be. بارك الله فيكم. Any questions?
It's not tomorrow?
Inshallah we'll try tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow inshallah, because we don't know what's happening.
So inshallah the Shaykh said we can do tomorrow inshallah, and we will let
We
you know
can
the time,
do
inshallah.
every day until we finish.
Okay.
Same time every day.
Inshallah ta'ala we'll try to do it the same time every day inshallah ta'ala until we finish it بإذن الله ta'ala. بارك الله فيكم. Any questions? Have it prepared for tomorrow's sitting, and then after tomorrow's sitting we will take the questions inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.